So welcome everyone to the Strong Women Podcast Facebook Live. We're doing another Facebook Live, and today we have really the privilege of having a guest back. If you haven't heard Kathy's episode, her first one, which is all about her story and who she is, you must listen to that episode. I think it's episode 4. So we've been wanting to have her back. So Sarah and I have been anticipating today because we wanted to have Kathy back, because one thing we want to do is to continue to communicate our vision for the Strong Women Podcast and this community. And so let me introduce Kathy, and then we'll start talking to her. But Kathy Koch, if you don't know who she is, then you haven't been around Colson Center very much because Colson Center loves her. We love her. And she is the president of Celebrate Kids. She is a speaker and an author. She's written many of my favorite books. We're going to talk to her today about 8 Great Smarts. I was just reading this over this weekend, Screens and Teens, Start with the Heart, and other ones, but these are the ones I just grabbed quickly. So author of some great books. And she is a friend of Sarah and I. And just on a personal level, Kathy is just a kind woman. She's a good listener. And she has just a genuine love for people, especially people who are struggling to find their place. And so we love to spend time with her, and we love that she is doing this Facebook Live with all of us today. So Kathy, thank you so much for being with us.
Well, you're very welcome. And it is very kind of you, Erin. I love both of you. I love your families, and ministering together to give more women hope and purpose is a real privilege. So thanks for trusting me with this valuable time.
So I mentioned before, about wanting to revisit our vision, and part of having you on, and we want to talk about the 8 Great Smarts in the context of women and how we are made differently and how we're made, with different smarts, strengths. But our vision at the Strong Women Podcast is a deeper understanding of the humanity, value, intellect, and creativity of women. And so with that in mind, and just thinking about, we want to be a community first that encourages, that points people to God, that glorifies God, but then that we're a community that encourages the love of learning in each other. And all those things are, the values, our intellect, our creativity. Well, I guess, what are your thoughts about that? Because I'm sure you probably have some, but just about how there is that need. I think Sarah and I kind of identified that need of having a community that encourages the love of learning. And we're going to talk about how we learn differently. And it's actually so beautiful. But what are your thoughts about that?
Well, you've bit off a lot to chew. I mean, God has given the both of you a beautiful vision and a beautiful purpose for the women who you minister to. And you stepped into a space that was empty. And I'm proud of both of you. And I'm proud of the Colson Center and the board of directors to decide that this was a valuable thing to do. Women need to know who they are. We teach and Celebrate Kids that identity controls behavior. So I need to know who I am so I can know who to be in the context of my community. It starts in the family, and then it ripples out to the extended family, and then to the community of church, and maybe the schools, and maybe a homeschool co-op, and a neighborhood, and a ministry that we're involved in. So for women to know who they are, both creativity, with their intellect, and all the purposes that God created them, it's so valuable. And I can only imagine the testimonies that you've received from women who didn't know that they could step into a situation and be a blessing until they heard you guys talk about it.
Well, and the other thing is, our culture is giving women, but really just humans, a small vision of identity, and, just a really limited. And so I'm excited to talk with you more about the big picture. And I pray that comes out in our conversation, is that your identity is not constructed, it's grounded, it's been determined. And I love what you say, you were created on purpose with a purpose, which is a short sentence that has huge implications. And but I think through our conversation too, that we're going to see that not only will this help us understand our own identity in Christ, but it will help us with noticing that of our neighbors and our children and our husbands and our coworkers and our church family and all that. And in the foreword to the 8 Great Smarts, John, my husband, wrote the foreword, and so you can read that. You should read Kathy's 8 Great Smarts. It's so helpful for so many reasons. But I love when he quotes the C.S. Lewis quote from Weight of Glory. You've never. There are no ordinary people. You've never talked to a mere mortal. It is immortals whom we joke with, work with, marry, snub, and exploit. Immortal horrors or everlasting splendors. And that really is the weight of what we're talking about today. So anyway, I just am so grateful that you're with us, Kathy.
So, okay, we're going to jump into this idea of the 8 Great Smarts and the research that you discovered from a psychologist at Harvard. And so we're going to unpack these 8 things. But one thing, as Sarah and I have been talking about, wanting to encourage the listeners of our podcast to love learning, to jump into learning if they aren't already, to keep pursuing it if they are, but not ever wanting to become or to communicate a type of snobbery, a type of like, oh, you haven't read that book? Oh, you probably should have, or we just want to say, yeah, oh my gosh, this book is so great. You should read this book, or maybe you'd like this one better. But encouraging people to learn and not just making it so narrow that they learn only the way Sarah and I learn, or that they communicate, or that creatively comes out in them in the same way that Sarah, it might creatively come out for Sarah and I. So how, I guess I'm just thinking about how we can encourage people to learn, even if they aren't, like, I'm thinking of the example of people saying, well, I'm just not a reader, which I totally get that, because I actually used to say that about myself when I was younger. But because we're believers and we're people of the word, we have to read, we do have to pursue learning through God's word and other books, but it can look different. So I guess I just love your thoughts on that, like how we can continue to cultivate a pursuit of learning without this snobbery of like, do you get what I mean?
I think so. I love your heart that we would be humble and not make people feel stupid. We certainly never want that to happen. So, I mean, one of the things that's on my mind, and it's probably on the mind of others, so I'll just say it, is if you're a follower in the Lord, if you follow Jesus Christ, then learning is your life. Proverbs 4:13 is one of the verses that proclaims that. Hold on to instruction, guard it well, for it is your life. And I teach kids to, put their hands on their brain, if you will, and guard your heart and hold on. And learning is your life, not grades, not performance, not are you first chair, second chair viola, not are you in advanced algebra, or are you just in algebra? No, learning is your life. And when I do high school graduation messages, I love to remind the students that they will never be finished if they take God and his word seriously. And the passion that the three of us have is to understand that you can learn in a variety of ways. I just celebrated a friend's birthday last night, and she's near retirement. And she's not a reader, Erin. She's one of those that would say, yeah, I just don't really enjoy reading. And again, I respect that as an author and speaker. I get that. And I said, I wonder if in your retirement, you'll find out that you actually could enjoy reading when you're not reading at work and you're not stressed. And she's like, oh, no. I still can't imagine. But you know what? My friend learns at museums, and my friend learns by interviewing and discussing relevant current events with people. And she cares deeply about the things of the Lord and worships and reads and ministers hope to people in a variety of ways, because she's been the recipient of the hope of Christ. And so to understand it's different. And I meet women who have never felt all that bright because the system didn't work for them. Or they had somebody who paralyzed their brain. Your brain is a muscle. It works like all the other muscles in our body. And it's squishy. If I cut open your skull, and I love to tell kids, I'll never do that, but if I did, I would find a grapefruit size, very squishy brain that can be cut with a dull knife, because 78% of your brain is water. That's just a golden nugget, that water is the intellectual energy drink. But the thing that's, thing that's relevant is, people who think that, they don't learn like somebody else and therefore they're stupid. That's not the case.
It's so funny throughout the year. One of the questions, which we asked you, Kathy, but we ask all our guests, is what books are you reading right now? And even that is so interesting to see the difference in what they're even interested in learning about. And Aaron and I were talking about this just the other day. Like, we do ask all our guests that, and most of our guests have some sort of answer for it. But it's so different. Like, some people are reading specifically about their field of expertise, or we talked to Emily Gow, who was also at Wilberforce Weekend this past year, and her pick was a gender theorist who's not a believer and is totally in opposition to the way Emily Gow would see things, but that was her book. And then you've got others who are reading these beautiful stories or these devotional books, and it's so funny how even what they choose to invest in comes out, and so even their different personalities come out in that.
And if we know who we are, and if we know why we are who we are, then we can identify the things that we ought to be investing in, whether it be through books or through conversation or through museum tours or whatever. And if we don't know who we are yet, if we have young listeners today, then the eclectic approach is going to bring so much life to your life, because you don't know yet. And it's never too late. I still enjoy discovering new things and new ideas through interviews and interactions that I might have.
I'm just thinking also about Weight of Glory. C.S. Lewis makes the observation in his essay on membership about what Paul says about and you're referencing the body, and how when Paul talks about the body of Christ, and he uses examples of actual body parts, and Lewis makes a point that if we're not participating as members of the body, then the body, it's actually an injury to the body. It's not just like, oh, they're not here, so it's like, no, we needed that hand, and the hand isn't functioning like the hand is supposed to. And so, which I think leads well into these 8 different smarts, and that we all are smart. You will say smart, and you've said smart is a power word.
Yeah.
And so when we learn that about ourselves, it empowers us and reminds us of the value that we have. And so the 8 great smarts. So maybe I'll list them really quick, just to
wait. But can I say
overview.
something before you get into that? I just have to say one thing really quick. All right. So whenever you hear Dr. Kathy talk, it's so fun. It's almost more fun to just watch the audience, because like 2 weeks ago, John and I were at an event with Kathy, and I was sitting next to a teenage boy and across from about 4 teenage girls who were kind of a little bit checked out. And they were like slouching over and not interested. But Kathy got up there and started talking about just being made in the image of God and what it means, what identity even looks like. And she was mentioning some of these smarts. And these girls were sitting in the balcony and watching these girls, and they're like looking at each other, like laughing. Oh yeah, that's totally me. And they're doing this little heart thing at Kathy. She can't even see them because she's way down on stage, but they're like totally, And so I love that.
I love that story.
I feel like such a rock star, Sarah, when you told me that there were girls up there, making the heart sign.
Oh yeah.
Like, whoa. Like,
I know you got the heart throb,
I mean, it's, and I say, it's not about me. It's about the message that they're desperate to hear, which is that they do matter, and that their future can be bright if they invest in their present. And Aaron, as you unwrap these 8, we want women to know that today is not a wasted day. And even if your past wasn't what you had hoped it would have been with the intellectual pursuit, doesn't mean that you've plateaued or that you're finished. You can engage much more and get deeply involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so let's start with maybe word smart. We'll start with that. I'm looking at your list in the book. So a word smart person thinks with words.
Yeah, and I would say it this way, Erin. Because we have all eight, and this is a really, like, God is so generous when he creates us. He could have made us puppets on a string that he controls, but he gave us a brain and he lets us use it. And I don't know if that was one of his best decisions or not, but when I look around at what's going on in the world. But so let me word it this way, Erin. When we are being word smart, we think with words. Okay. So if you and many of us talk inside of our head. Those of us who are word smart, we don't necessarily need an audience. We like the sound of our own voice, or somebody right now is listening on Facebook and they're actually having a conversation inside their head about a memory of when they were in third grade and somebody said, please stop talking, or they said it in a rude tone. And they're talking to themselves. They think they're listening to me, but they're actually listening to that inside voice. Word smart people are always dealing with words. We do tend to read, write, speak, and listen. It could be recreational and fun, or it could be the pursuit of wisdom. And it's the only reason we talk about it first is that it's what we call a school smart, or I would say it's a church smart. What do we do all day in a school setting is read, write, speak, and listen. And church is even created where these people will feel safest because we have to listen and read and probably write and maybe even speak up. And so I wonder if there are people who have underserved the body because they don't think this is their strength. But I want to say to them, you have it. Mm-hmm. You can invest and develop more of this part of the brain if you want to. But no matter what amount you have, if that was God's best choice for you, then all of us would pray that you would honor the Lord with gratitude today and not, I like to say, don't lust after somebody else's brain. Mm-hmm. Really do accept what God's chosen for you to have.
One thing that you say that might be important to bring up with each of these smarts is that basically our strengths, when they're not lived in the redeemed way, can be our weaknesses. And sometimes it's actually helpful to think, what are my weaknesses? Because then we can say, well, that actually might be a strength if I surrender that to the Lord or whatever. So maybe as we're talking about it too, we could pull out some of the tendencies of these smarts to just be cautious about.
No, that's a really good point. I would say that our strengths can get us into big trouble. Mm-hmm. They might not look like weaknesses. They might actually look like super strengths. Mm-hmm. And, I would say that anything well done, overdone is badly done. Mm-hmm. And would you guys agree that too much of a good thing is not a good thing?
Yes.
And so those of us who are word smart, we can talk over people. We can gossip, tease, name call, impress with our vocabulary or not. Mm-hmm. I just did a program for about 100 Christian school teachers, and I asked them to raise their hand if they thought this was one of their strengths, and I had them keep their hand up if they could educate, edify, tell the truth, build up, compliment, and teach truth. And then I said, keep your hand up if you can gossip, tease, name call, impress with your vocabulary. And everybody kept their hand up that whole time, because we can do it all. And that's why the heart needs to be surrendered to the things of the Lord, so that it becomes the kind of the boundary for the intellect, if I could put it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, let's explain, if we can, or unpack a little bit logic smart. And we probably all feel like, oh, I know what that is, but maybe you could unpack that a little bit more. What's a logic smart?
Yeah, sure, Erin. So when we're being logic smart, we think with questions, and we love it when things make sense. We can actually struggle with faith because there's much of, it's understandable. The things of the Lord are understandable when you dig in. But initially, I was confused and angry that I didn't understand it well, because logic smart people can be very prideful in their ability to understand and explain and solve problems. And so I was on my way to hell until I found somebody who would answer my questions and led me into a saving knowledge of the Lord Jesus, for which, of course, I'm very grateful. Logic smart people tend to enjoy discovering truth on their own. Science in the academic domain might be their thing, but even being in a type of a Sunday school class or a life group or a Bible study fellowship opportunity where you really are expected to think and reason things through for yourself, Those would be characteristics of logic smart. We love fairness. We have a high sense of justice, and we might be, dealing with the masking and the things that are happening with COVID differently from our spouses, our neighbors, our best friends, and our children, partly because of the way that we think things through.
I love in your chapter about logic smart, you were just kind of trying to describe it, and you said that that it's fun to think. If someone
Yes.
says, "Do you want to have fun?" Sure. What do you want to think about? Like, I just thought that was so funny. It's a good way to describe it.
And I think that's, the three of us,
Yeah.
before we went live, right? The three, we could have a party all day long, and we don't need to script it. The three of us, with many others who we know, we love to think and reason and pursue truth and better ourselves, and all of us can do that. Women without as many brain cells in the logic smart part of the brain can do it as an act of obedience unto the Lord, because we are called to pursue truth, and it won't be necessarily as much fun. But yeah, if you're logic smart, you enjoy this kind of thing, and it's why you're live with us on Facebook right now.
Right. Well, and another thing to point out is that logic smart and word smart are the academic ones. So they're the ones that if you're not high in word or logic, that's when you might feel like, I'm not smart.
I really appreciate you bringing that out. And I want to say to women that I have met women who have, and I want to say this carefully, have underperformed in life because they were in a school setting that did not allow them to flourish. Word and logic is how the old system was designed. And I'll just say that many people home educate their children partly because they don't fit into the constant reading, writing, speaking, listening, asking and answering questions. But we want to pursue truth in a variety of ways. And that's an advantage of homeschooling. So people who are listening, who were in, I went to public school my whole life, and it's sit this way, hold your pencil this way, and answer the evens, not the odds. And you have 22 minutes, not 23. And oh my goodness, if you're not word and logic, you could die under the weight of that system. And so I've met women in my audiences who, you guys know this, they come in as moms and they listen to me as moms. They care about their kids. And within 10 minutes, the inner child is listening. I can almost watch the countenance change because they never had a daddy who said, "You're smart."
Right.
They always thought, my brother's the smart one. He's the one earning A's. So I want to say, we all know people who didn't do well in school, but they've done very well in life. And we probably all know people who did very well in school and they're not doing well in life.
Yes.
All 8 of these matter. And I would also say that Jesus did not come to earth and take our sin upon himself, that we would have an abundant school experience. No, he's called us to an abundant life. Right? Praise God. And that means that all 8 of these matter. And so the women who are not as word and logic, if you've been angry at God, I respect and get that. If you believe that you're not signing up for committees, you haven't volunteered to write a newsletter column for your homeschool co-op or your public school or your church, but you know that you have insight that would be shared, but you haven't stepped up to be that strong woman because you don't trust your writing ability. Well, we live in community, so you could partner with someone. Or maybe this podcast episode is all about you discovering that you've been lied to. And you're going to wake up and you're going to say, man, in God's strength, I can be strong. And that would include developing abilities that I didn't know were within me to be awakened.
Yeah. Yeah. And the understanding of the smarts, it is so powerful. And like you're saying, that is why a lot of people to homeschool, because they recognize this in their kids. And actually it's reminding me, my husband and I had dinner last week with the older couple from church who were telling us the story about their daughter, who now is in her 30s. But when she was in junior high, they got pulled into a meeting and her teachers were concerned. And it was basically expressed like, we've done some testing and she's probably not even going to graduate high school. And you might, she's not really smart. So you might want to have her learn some skills or whatever. Well, the parents left the meeting and the dad was saying, I knew she had so many abilities and they knew she needed some help in the academic, but as we're talking to them, what I already knew was that because they had shown us their hallway was lined with the most beautiful pictures that their daughter now paints. She's a painter, and their hallway was lined with these beautiful pictures that they had showed us when we got there. And so hearing this story, and I said, have you read Kathy Kidd's book? Because here, of course, you know, this was 20 years ago when this happened to them, but the power of those parents saying, well, we'll get her some help for this, but we know she's smart. It's just figuring out how, you know, she is smart, which leads perfectly to some of these other smarts that are so overlooked in our culture. But picture smart, which I think their daughter obviously is picture smart. But can you talk to us about how a picture smart person is kind of wired?
Yeah, it's a beautiful illustration. So when we're being picture smart, we think with our eyes in pictures, either on paper or in our mind. So, you know, I might always have inner chatter as a very word smart person. A person who's more picture smart is constantly drawing up in their mind. And if I say the word tree, they can see a tree, even if they're in a dark room with no windows, because their mind sees what the words would invent, if you will. So artistic, creative, probably enjoy fiction, creative writing, history, because they see it come alive. Probably good storytellers because they have a rich vocabulary for the picture that they want the person to see while they're listening to the story. And these are kids who will say to me sometimes, and even women will say, no, I'm not smart, my brother's smart. And then I find out, like this person you're describing, and they'll say, no, the reason you're creative and artistic and talented with color is because you are smart. I met a woman who was 70 years old who came to a pro-life event that I spoke at. And in the context of my message about all children created in the image of God, I mentioned the 8 smarts. And she came up to me, 70 years old, and she said she's a professional artist. She was selling paintings for many, many, many dollars. Never knew she was smart.
Wow.
Wept with me, and had people still, 70 years old, professional, successful artists, people still saying to her, you know, are you ever going to do anything real? Like, well, I mean, that's just wrong, and that's just broken. And the same thing happens with music smart. The next one, where we think with rhythms and melodies, we tend to make music when we're excited. It might sound like noise to others. We think it's music. We might meet God in song. We might find that the worship experience in a church service is the most important part of that church service for us. We might have discovered deep theology in the lyrics of the songs that we sing, whether that be corporately or individually. And we delight in the creative music. We even hear music in the wind, if you will. We might whistle when we're content. There's a music, a lot of people wake up with a song, and that would be indicative of music smart. And again, these people, unfortunately, in the system, Aaron, often feel less smart because it's not valued. And that's a really, really tragic thing, because obviously God created us this way, therefore it has value. So those are two of the creative smarts that we're smart because we're creative, because we're smart. That's what I want people to understand.
So it's funny, back to that event that I was with you, and I was watching the heartthrob teenage girls, you know. Well, the teenage boy I was sitting next to is like, the whole time he's listening to you, he's drumming on his leg. And then he starts kicking the thing in front of him, and I was like, but I didn't say it because I'm thinking Kathy would say this kid is music smart. But I was like, could you just stop kicking the thing, you know? But anyway, I thought that was funny too, because I was channeling you through that whole thing.
I love that. And you know, Sarah, it's one of the reasons to discover this about ourselves and about others, because what that boy does need, of course, is humility, self-respect, self-control, and respect for others. I tell people all the time, you know, just because you're word smart doesn't give you the right to talk all the time. And I tell kids that just because you're music smart doesn't mean that you get to kick the chair in front of you because you like the beat that you're creating. No. You live in community, you work, and you serve in community. So find an alternative that will not be distracting to the people around you. And that's what comes with great character. It's possible we have moms, women of all variety listening today whose part of their brain was paralyzed when they were told, stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it. You know, if I was raised by parents who would have said, would you stop all that talking? I'm so sick of it. Go find something to do. If they would have said, would you shut up already? I wouldn't be on this podcast with you. But they saw all the words in me as a strength to develop, not a problem to eliminate. I wonder if there are women listening who were gifted by God to be very music smart and were really good at it until they heard their dad say, stop all that racket in there.
Hmm.
Or they used to click the pen in such a way that at the business meetings, they were teased. And so the music in them died. I wonder if there's a woman listening who was a doodler and a drawer and keeps really close attention to what's going on by doodling while she listens until somebody said, that's distracting, you shouldn't do that. She stopped. Now she doesn't listen as well. Now she can't contribute as deeply. And now she doesn't feel as good as for herself. I want to say God can reawaken the smarts that were partially paralyzed by encounters that you had. And maybe that's why you're listening to us today.
Okay, let me ask you a question on that. Like taking those listeners that you just mentioned that maybe don't see their gifting as a gifting or their smart as a smart because of those few scenarios, or obviously there's more scenarios. Do you have a question, like an introspective question we can ask ourselves? Like what brings you life, or that kind of question. How do we dig down and find those things? Is that too big of a question?
That's a beautiful question. I would say, if you described your childhood, how different would it be to what you're currently living your life to be? So like I was very music smart as a kid. Am I still interested in music? I don't perform anymore because of my schedule and all that. But how would people describe you who knew you 10 years ago? And would they describe you the same way today? One of the questions I've asked people is, if money wasn't an issue, what would you be pursuing? And the reason for that question, Sarah, is I've met many, many women who stopped taking piano lessons because they had to get a job when they were a 16-year-old, or mom had to sell the piano, or there was a divorce, and they, and so I've said, if money wasn't an issue, and sometimes again with tears, I wonder if I could take piano lessons again one day. And yes, you can. And what a delight that might be to your spirit. So those are some of the questions. What brings you joy is a question I do like asking people. But I think looking back, how would you be described? How would others describe you to know you? Sometimes we have blind spots and we don't really know. So that might work.
Yeah, that's what one thing I've loved in the podcast and just talking to all different women is how in some of the stories, how, that we've thought, oh, shoot, my life's going this way. I really had planned on this or whatever. And then, you see how God weaves these, all the experiences and the struggles and is using it for good. And one of our hopes with sharing these stories is that women would say, oh no, this is a good thing about me. I'm just like this lady who, didn't do well in school, but look at all she's accomplished. Or, oh yeah, I really relate to this. And then am inspired by her story of overcoming something. And that's just what I love about looking at these different smarts, because it reminds us of the humanity of the people around us. Like Sarah was reminded of the humanity of the teenage boy sitting next to her who's being annoying, but of ourselves too, and if we have heard a different narrative our whole life, that you're an artist, but isn't that just like a hobby? Smart people do have degrees and make a lot of money, and just how we've, in our culture, how we put value on different things. But in the church, this just should not be in our vocabulary. It shouldn't be in our vocabulary. And we should have these types of eyes to see people and ourselves in a way that dignifies the great imagination God had in creating us all so different.
Yeah. Now, this guy that was drumming on his legs, he might have been body smart. Should we talk about that one?
Oh yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So body smart, when we're being body smart, we move and we touch. And so we shake, rattle, and roll. And we love rocking chairs and chairs with wheels and beanbag chairs and clipboards. And we might remember things well when we go for a walk. So you're right that movement is often body smart. Now, if they're moving to a rhythm, if you're wondering, is there internal music that's driving the beat that you observe in his body, then there's probably a combination, which is a good time for me to say that the intelligences never work alone. They always work together. So somebody who is body and music would maybe go to become a drummer versus a flute player that is much less of a body necessary music ability, if you will. A trombone player, we have to be able to feel how far out to slide the slide. Oh, I'm so impressed by that. And that's a body smart, music smart combination. Yeah. So body smart people move, touch, shake, rattle, and roll. They might be truck drivers. They might be chiropractors. They might be lawyers who know how to pace in front of the jury box with that exact right posture. There could be actors and dancers and clay sculptors. And, you know, the woman who can make a meal and make less of a mess on the counter, it all stays in the bowl. Oh my gosh, that's important.
Oh, that is really important.
Makes sense. You know, like the 5-year-old, you let your 5-year-old help you make the cookies and half the batter's on the counter because he doesn't have the ability to stir well yet. You know, when I'm at a restaurant, like I was last night to celebrate my friend, I want the person coming toward me with a glass of water to be very body smart. So, so he walks correctly, doesn't trip, and puts it down on the table without spilling it. So, you know, these again are skills that show up. These kids have sometimes, these women have sometimes said, yeah, I never felt smart in school, even though I was a gymnast, or even though I was a dancer, or even though I've had great handwriting, it was never affirmed as an ability that came from my brain. So I was still wanting to be smart like a mathematician. We need to say to body, if you can kick the soccer ball through the goal with the left and right foot, you're smart. If you're a woman and you can, you know, work the room and you're hospitality queen of a baby shower your church is putting on, and you physically are able to, you know, gingerly make it through. And I don't know if that's a good example, but carrying your body well, it's significant. It's a good skill.
So one of our listeners, Susan, asked, and I think you kind of alluded to this, so I think it'd be a good place to ask this: can you be more than one smart?
We believe, based on research that Howard Gardner and others have done, is that we have the capacity to develop all 8. In other words, when you were created in your mother's womb, there was capacity here for all 8. The earlier they're awakened, the greater the likelihood they're a strength for a lifetime. And the more that we use them, the stronger they get. But they do always work together. As an author of books, I'm a word smart, logic smart thinker who needs to use the picture smart part of myself to add adjectives so that when you read my book, you see the story come alive. Again, a person who is, you know, picture smart, body smart is maybe a clay sculptor versus somebody who is picture smart, logic smart, maybe does graphs and analyzes charts for a committee at church. So yeah, they all work together, and we all have more than one. I'm usually able to say to people, identify the top 4, bottom 4. It's not essential that we get them in exact order, and it's a little bit prideful to think, oh, I have all 8 to the max. I have all 8.
Yeah.
Chances are not. Now I will say, and I don't want any men who might stumble upon the podcast to be offended, but what if I said that I think women have the potential to develop all 8 and keep all 8 alive, because you need all 8. If you are a woman who is parenting, you have kids who are smart in different ways from you, and for your love for them requires that you walk toward them and their interests, which will keep the interest alive in your brain. So I think women have the potential for all 8 of these to be rather well established.
I'm thinking about how, we're, Sarah and I are both mothers. So yeah, you are having to think about these children that you have, how they're smart, and then to appreciate it. And I was thinking about how just this morning, my youngest son, Jonah, who's very music and very body smart. And I noticed it early, like he was 6 months old and was moving like he was dancing in the Target shopping cart. And my grandma says, my grandma was with us, and she goes, it looks like he's dancing. And I said, isn't that funny? And there's no music. And then I was like, there was music playing in the store, and I hadn't even noticed it. But Jonah was hearing the music, and I was like, oh my gosh, Grandma, there's music playing. I didn't even notice. But this morning he was playing piano. I'm doing dishes, after breakfast, and he comes over and he goes, Mom, I think I want to play bagpipes. And I'm like, bagpipes? And then I'm like, what? Why do you say that? And he goes, because I want to play music while I'm marching around.
Word. That's like the best example
so the
ever.
next thing I know, he's like on Amazon looking up bagpipes, and I'm like, oh my word. But this is, and of course, I know we're going to talk to Kathy. So I'm thinking, oh my gosh, he is so music and he's wanting to combine them, and he doesn't even have the language for it. But this is, what we're talking about. And I can laugh and appreciate, oh yeah, maybe he's going to start with piano, but he might move to an instrument that he can do while he's walking around.
Right. And you do have a right to say no, so we don't want anyone listening to think that, we have to say yes to all of this.
Yeah.
But I'm a big marching band girl. My high school went to the Rose Bowl parade when I was a junior in high school. I went to the university I went to march in the band. So my body and my music was absolutely combined, and still going to concerts or even in church, I do not stand still. I don't dance, but I will, rotate from foot to foot, and that's the body and me responding. So I love that you love your son, and what a profound example at a 6-month-old. We are born this way. And like I just said, the earlier it's awakened, the greater the likelihood it's a strength. So and you didn't even make that happen. It happened because God is generous, and God equips us and empowers us.
That's and he really loves beautiful. Our children. I think we only have Nature Smart left, right?
Nature, people, and self.
We have all kinds of things. Well, let's go through those kind of quickly, because we're getting some questions. I want to make sure we have time. So go ahead.
Yeah, I can jump ahead and do all three if that'd be okay with you.
Yeah.
And then we have a brand new book I can mention as well that I'm not even sure you guys know about. But Nature Smart, when we're being Nature Smart, we think with patterns. That's how we know a bluebird isn't a blue jay and an elm tree isn't an oak tree. We love to be outside. We identify with God as creator with a capital C. And Genesis might be very important to us. Psalm 23, Psalm 46. Verses like, if we don't praise God, the rocks will cry out. Are very much going to resonate with the Nature Smart part of us. We might be the ones who landscape and sign up for the Weed the Garden Day at church, which our church regularly has landscape outside, helper days. And then People Smart and Self Smart, the last two really important. People Smart people think with other people. So we use words like the word smart people do, but we need an audience. People Smart people know what they know only when they hear themselves say it and someone responds to that. So we are chatty Cathys for sure, always looking for someone to engage with. So podcast listeners, I think, are often people smart, even if they don't get to talk back, but today they do. They love the intellectual dialogue. They love the conversations the two of you have with your guests, because people smart people value the conversation. They value shared pursuit of truth. And
that's right. Can I interrupt real quick? Because we have had feedback, and now I'm wondering if these listeners that give us this feedback are people smart, because they'll say, I feel like I am sitting down with you and having coffee.
Yes.
Would that be what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's really cool. They're putting themselves into that. That's really a high compliment. And yes, I would say they are people smart. And I will say also quickly, people smart people are also very good at reading body language. So we're the ones who can tell if your face is showing confusion or pondering. If you're people smart, you know that a kid is going to get into trouble before your kid is in trouble, because you have an ability to kind of hear a voice or see a body language. And that's a good skill for all women to have. And then self-smart people think deeply inside of themselves. Self-smart people do not need an audience. They need quiet, peace, privacy, and space. We learn through deep reflection. So back to how Aaron really started this broadcast of the fact that God would call us to learn, and your podcast is about the intellectual pursuit. People smart people pursue through conversation. Word smart people through reading and writing and journaling. And self smart people through deep, quiet soul searching. These women can be accused of being closed or lonely, but they're not. They love their own thoughts. They do value their opinions, sometimes too highly, and it might mean that they're not as teachable as they could be. But a very, very important smart. Let me say before we do questions, you guys, that my heart really goes out to self-smart women, because I think that you're largely misunderstood. You're quiet does not mean you don't have something to say. It means you don't need to say what you have to say. You're satisfied knowing it. But I want to say to you, show up. Part of your strength is the depth of your understanding.
Mhm.
And we lose. The community of Christ loses. The body of believers loses when you are satisfied knowing something and don't recognize that the community would benefit from it, whether that be your family or a slightly bigger community. So I have, again, wept with some self-smart women who have always felt less than, because no question is easy. Every question has to be deeply analyzed if you're self-smart. And so
Mhm.
by the time you have an answer, I've moved on. And
Right.
that's dishonoring to you. And
Mhm.
that's awkward in friendship. But maybe that's a discussion that's helpful today for somebody who's listening. So
Yeah,
those are the 8. I hope that's helpful.
that is super helpful. Okay, and I wanted to say something too, because as women, I think sometimes we can feel threatened by, maybe Erin has people smarts and I have word smart, and I feel threatened because I want to have people smarts or whatever. And early in my mothering years, I hosted a panel of mothers that were further along than I was. And I just said, could you please teach us? And I had about 3 or 4 women my age, and then 3 or 4 women 10 years older than us. And one lady said something that really stuck with me and has shaped my friendships and the way I work with other people. She said, make friends with people who are different than you. And she was specifically talking about homeschooling. But I think that's a challenge that I don't know if that's something that our listeners need to hear. I know it's certainly something I need to hear, but just that don't feel threatened by those differences. Learn from the differences and be friends together. It's like way more powerful if you combine all that together, right? So anyway, I just wanted to throw out that challenge. It's not really a question, but we have lots of questions. Are you seeing these, Erin?
Yes. So let's ask. So Missy's asking, do you see your smart strengths change from childhood to adulthood? And this is something we talked about before we started recording. But Kathy, are these things that might change as we go from children to adults?
They are malleable. They are not a constant. So if you have a new friend, I mean, I absolutely agree with Sarah to like, as an example, I'm not terribly picture smart. I don't think with my eyes, so I tend to not go to art museums. But I live in Fort Worth, Texas, where we're surrounded by brilliant arts. We have the Kimball. We have the most Western art of anywhere in the world. And I have a friend, a member of my board, who's a good friend of mine, who's very picture smart. So I will go to the art museum with her, and she'll convince me that that thing on the wall is art, and she'll help me understand, why it's worth $1,000,000. And I honor her, and she, enjoys my curiosity, and I'm better for it. I'm not ever going to be as picture smart as Andrea, but I'm more picture smart at the end of the day than I was at the beginning. So I don't think we have to pursue them for the sake of pursuing them. I think we honor who God's created us to be. But if you want to become a better friend of somebody who's nature smart, go to the zoo. If you want to become a better friend of somebody who's very music smart, trust her to take you to a concert of a different style of music that you've never really liked to see what's there for you. So they will peak and valley, and you can walk into a situation. You can say, Father God, raise my people smart. I'm joining this committee at the church, and I think it's the right thing to do. Help me be really people smart today and read people well, so that I can feel better about my opportunities here. You can pray that and watch God show up for you and increase it, whether it be for the moment or for the long term.
That's good advice. Okay, I love this question from Susan. What smart is it when your son has a propensity for danger? Like bike over jumps or on a dirt bike, then race cars and all that. So what would you say to Susan, and how should she kind of help this son not die?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you're raising a 4-year-old who's sitting in the balcony with you, said to you, if I was Spider-Man, I could get to daddy.
Yeah, I would
like
web
his
down.
Dad, oh my gosh, I would web down. So his dad is, way down on the stage. You're in the upper balcony in the back, and you've got a 4-year-old in your arms. Like, you're not Spider-Man. I mean,
Yes, you are
oh my
not.
goodness, Sarah.
This is make believe.
Yeah, oh my gosh. So great question. I think it's logic smart and body smart. I think logic smart people can either solve problems or create problems for other people to solve. Logic smart people are very good at cause effect thinking and comparison contrast. We love to think and make sense of things. And so we're predicting would be a Logic, smart, skill. How fast would my bike have to go to get over the pond? Probably have to go back all the way to the top of the hill, and I better really never coast and really pedal hard. And I wonder if I can do it. So I might say logic, smart, gone bad, but that's logic, smart, and then of course body smart, especially if the thrill seeking has to do with physical ability. That would be body. And this is why moms and dads and grandparents and teachers, we provide the boundaries that are blessings when love is the motivation. And we say, not yet, son, not yet. I value you, and we're not heading to the hospital today, so stop it and let's find something else to do.
Yeah. I love that because this appreciating doesn't mean there's just no limits to what, it's like if your son likes to go fast on the skateboard like mine does, then you train him in the habit of putting on a helmet. And
yes,
knee pads are just not an option when you skateboard, and things like that of like, you have to protect, but then it's not, you have to work on, especially if it's a different kind of personality and smart than yours, of not resenting that and saying like, I love how you just want to go for the biggest ramp. And I'm scared of that ramp, but you just want to do it. And I love that about you, and so you can encourage it, but then also you have to wear the helmet. So there's a practicality to like, we have to live life together. And it doesn't mean no limits just because we recognize, oh, this is a real strength of yours, that there's just no limits to it. And we just have to get out of the way, especially if we're parents or whatever.
No, it's so good, Erin. Pray for common sense. Common sense is a part of logic, but I think we would all admit that common sense is something you discover as you need it. After the fact, well, that wasn't sensible.
Yeah.
So this is where the strong woman steps up and says, I love you too much to allow you to do that. You're too young to have thought it through well. I do trust you, but not in this situation. So let's give it a rest and wait until dad comes home.
Yeah.
Okay, so Kathy, the next question is, I think one that we all kind of wrestle with, but how much time should we spend developing our weaker smarts? Or should we just primarily press into like our stronger smarts? How should we manage that or think about that?
Yeah, what a great question. It has to do with your purpose. Why are you created? Why are you alive? Sarah has shared with you that one of our statements at Celebrate Kids is, I'm created on purpose, with purpose, for purpose. And so if now all of us have the same purpose, which would be to glorify God, to win the lost to Christ, and to disciple believers to the greater maturity. All of us share those purposes. So that means that all of us ought to be women of the word and prayer warriors and compassionate to the people who are hurting and all that. If you believe that you're called to do something or be someone, and you know that there's something you're lacking, you have a decision to make. Did you hear God's call wrong? Or will you trust God for the equipping? I think children ought to be pursuing all that they can in all the ways that they can, because they're young. And we don't know for sure yet all of their purposes. And that would be career and service and volunteering and missions and all those kinds of things. The older we get, the greater permission we can give ourselves to say, I don't need to be really good at that. As an example, both Erin and Sarah know that spelling is not one of my strengths. I would never say I can't spell. That's a lie. I'd never say spelling is hard. That's a lie. But spelling isn't one of my natural strengths. I'm very logic smart. I want the rules to work. And they don't. And I'm also not very picture smart. So I don't remember what the word looked like the last time I saw it. Was it the S that was doubled or the P that was doubled? But I'm still an author of 5 books, working on number 6. I blog all the time. I have an earned PhD in reading and ed psych, because you don't let your weaknesses win. So if you can't, so I don't worry about, I don't know how to spell this word easily. I don't worry about it. I don't practice it 10 times each with beautiful handwriting. I use a misspeller's dictionary so I can find the word the way I wish it was spelled. True story. I also
didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah, it's a misspeller's dictionary. Sarah, in my dictionary, if you look up knowledge, it is spelled Knowledge.
Yeah.
And that's how knowledge should be spelled. Right. Why is there a K in front of the N? But it'll tell you how to spell it. It's no different from a kid or an adult using a calculator to figure out 20% for the tip for the waitress. And then I also allow my staff to help proofread. Now, we still make mistakes because we're human, but I'm surrounded by really good people. And so I'll write a column and I'll send it to the gal that puts together our email newsletter. And I trust Tammy to read it and proofread it and find that I used the wrong your, the wrong there, the wrong whether, or, a misspelled word that my spell check didn't catch. So I hope that's a helpful answer. I don't want weaknesses to win. And I don't think that we worry about them. When we're older, younger people, if I were talking to college age and below, I would have a slightly different take.
Yeah. This one I think is so great because not only are we trying to figure out our own strengths and being able to recognize how God has, made us on purpose with a purpose. I missed the other purpose. What was that?
For purpose.
For a purpose. There we go.
It's redundant, but it's just fun.
But purpose is so great and so hard to say, and it looks funny when you say it. But okay, this we want to be able to share this life-giving truth with other people. And this question is from Jamie. She says, my college daughter was visiting with a Christian friend yesterday who doesn't feel like she has purpose. What would you tell this young college woman?
Yeah, great question. I would say this, and certainly I'll start by saying the smarts can help people identify an avenue in which to walk in. So I do think the smarts are relevant. I have had conversations with young people that say, for instance, you're a logic smart, word smart person. Maybe you're going to be a journalist, an ethical news reporter, a lawyer, a teacher, a collaborator. Those kinds of things can be helpful. I will also say, as I teach in the book Screens and Teens, and when I teach with Colson and Summit, young people don't know today what their purposes are because they're multi-talented, multi-able, multi-passionate. Many of the young people that tell me they don't know what to do in their future, they don't know what the purpose is. It's not that they're apathetic. It's not that they don't think they can do anything. They think they could do everything. And so it's very different. And it's not that we get, hey, why don't you know what you can do? They may have so many options and they want to be happy because technology has lied to them that they can be happy all the time. And so they don't know if they want to be an accountant, they've never done it, would they be happy? I like asking young people the question, what problems do you want to help solve? I think that's a question that can help us identify purpose. What problems do you want to help solve? Our young people today have seen the brokenness of the world, whether that be COVID, masking, Haiti, Afghanistan, homelessness, hunger, abortion, foster kids aging out, single moms that are overwhelmed. I mean, there's so much. And when I was their age, I didn't know about it because we didn't have 24-hour news, Twitter followers. And we didn't have focus. And with faith, they're looking for and so I love asking what problems do you want to help solve. The second question that I would recommend is what people do you want to serve? Because they tend to be oriented, and we all ought to be oriented to being difference makers with people. So I'll leave it at that. Those two questions, coupled with the possibility that these smarts that we could identify and say, I've noticed that you ask a lot of questions. Logic seems to be important to you. Pursuing truth matters to you. Have you thought about teaching or counseling or pastoring or ministry?
Because those are not just like sit and simmer about yourself and how great you are.
Oh yeah.
It's like you're looking outward. Like, what problems do you want to help solve? It's looking at the things around you and then like, how can I help? And
yes,
I just love that focus with young people. Well, all of us need that reminder. We're good at thinking about ourselves, frankly, but and that's really where I think, we talked about this before we started recording of like, what's the difference between like personality tests and this book. And I do think over and over again in the book and over again, when you teach, you remind us that God made us for a purpose. And, it's not just this like selfish, self-reflective thing. It really is because God wants us to do things, big things, small things. Yeah. And so I love those two questions. Sarah, I interrupted you, but
no,
what were you gonna say?
That's great. I just love what you said too. And back to when I said, how can, when I asked you, Kathy, what are some questions we can ask ourselves to kind of rediscover
Yeah.
if things have been squelched. These are two questions that we can sit down and think through and pray through. So I just want to say I am so grateful for this time, and Aaron and I will continue to pray that this ministers to you all. And when we're talking about identity, that's powerful. And the enemy does not want us to understand that our identity is grounded and rooted. It's not constructed. It's grounded in the Creator, because we were created with a purpose, on purpose, for a purpose. I got it that time. And so we're so grateful that you all joined us. And if you want to hear Kathy's Wilberforce talk, which was really different from what we just talked about now, but so powerful and dives into this identity even more, you can go to wilberforceweekend.org and find out how to get the online access to all that material. I hope that you will all read Kathy's book. Books.
We're not just saying that we appreciate you flippantly. We do, because
Yes.
I know you're so busy with Summit. You speak to students so much in the summer, especially. But thank you for making time for the Strong Women Podcast community. And I do hope everyone listening, if you haven't gotten Kathy's book, she didn't ask us to promote her book. She said, I'll come on and talk about whatever you want. Sarah and I wanted to talk about this because this book has been powerful in our own lives, with our own kids and our own families, and how we look at everyone around us. I mean, it's really had a profound impact. So we recommend her book for all of you, because it's such an encouragement to remember how creative God was in making all of us. But Kathy, thank you so much for being with us.
You're welcome. And let me say that the new book that I'm not sure you gals even know about is 8 Great Smarts for Homeschoolers, written by Tina Hollenbeck, who's a member of the Celebrate Kids team. So I wrote the foreword. It's based on 8 Great Smarts. So if anyone's listening who's homeschooling their children, this takes the truth in my book to a deeper level of planning instructional support for the children who you're raising. So I'd recommend that as well. And I want to say what I often say when I'm live, which I'll say tomorrow from Minnesota, and that is that you were not responsible for this information yesterday. So no shame or blame for not knowing this about yourself or not knowing it about someone else, but all of us would have hope for tomorrow. And I'll join these ladies praying that the things that were said here that ministered hope to you, you will remember, and that you'll do something with the hope that we've given you, because that's what makes us strong women, not having ideas, but acting on them. So ladies, you're important to me. I value both of you. I value the podcast, and I'm really grateful that you allowed me to have these minutes with you and your community. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time on Facebook Live or on our weekly podcast.